One of the increasing pressures is there is this phenomenon of aging out worship leaders. That's such a burden to me, young and hip. And I've known friends who have gotten aged out at the point in their ministry where they had more to offer than they'd ever had to offer before.
Hey, I'm Andrea Olson. I've been leading worship and training worship leaders for nearly 20 years, and my mission is to support worship leaders just like you in volunteer-supported ministries because I know what it's like. I've been there. It's amazing, but you have a big job, and sometimes you might feel a little bit alone. But I'm here to remind you that you aren't. We'll cover spiritual and leadership growth, practical resources, and get encouragement from other worship leaders from all over the world. I truly want to see you lead from the overflow, not the overwhelm. So grab a cup of tea or coffee and join me. Welcome to the Overflow Worship Podcast. Well, I am very excited today because I have a good friend of ours joining me all the way from Indiana, Brian Tabor. Thanks for joining us on the Overflow Worship Podcast.
Man, it's my honor to be here. Here's the deal. If you're listening to this, anytime Andrea asks you to do something, just say yes. Because it will be time well spent. She is the best, and my yes is always on the table for Overflow. So I'm honored to be here.
Thank you so much, Brian. Well, we feel the same way about you and Kim and about Worship Probs. We're just excited to have found people that we align with in ministry. You know, my husband and I just feel a connection with you and Kim and your hearts, your genuine hearts for the church and for ministry. So thank you guys for what you're doing. I know it's not easy all the time, but it's rewarding, and we just see your hearts in that. So thank you guys.
Oh, well, we feel the same way. We feel the same way about you guys. And Gabe, I have the funniest relationship with Gabe. It's just mostly sharing Instagram reels back and forth or TikToks or whatever. And he is just the funniest guy. So we feel absolutely the same way about you guys.
Yes, I know he appreciates having buddies that he can just send a random reel to with no explanation. We all need that, right? Don't we need it?
Absolutely. And usually they hit when I need a laugh, man. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, he's great. Yeah, he's fantastic.
Yeah, there's no judgment. There's no questioning. It's just like, yep, that was a good one, which, I think there's something to be said about that for all of us, right? We all need people in our lives who are genuine connections, but also can laugh with us, can just kind of be be in the space that we need, and they kind of understand that space. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. And I haven't always had that, but I'm grateful as I look back on the journey of the people that God's placed in my life when I needed them most.
Amen. You got to find your people. I mean, ministry is, I used to always tell people, they would ask me, what do you like about being a worship pastor? And I was like, well, first of all, God called me to do it. So my yes is there. And, on the weekly stuff, it's like the highest of highs, it's the lowest of lows, and everything in between. You'll have you got the best seat in the house for Easter Sunday or Christmas Eve or whatever, and you get to see all this stuff happening around you, and light bulbs going on for people when they're really connecting with the Lord, which is fantastic. But then you've got challenges on your team, you're pastoring people, you're going to the hospital, you're sitting with people who are really, it puts things in perspective, when you're I'm complaining about my bass player not confirming in time in planning center or whatever, and you're sitting in the hospital. All those things were so refreshing to me. And so, finding your people, I think it helps you walk through those highs and lows, and you have to have a good foundation. You got to have a faith foundation, and you got to have a people foundation. I'm right there with you.
Yeah. And it's it takes work and it takes effort to cultivate that and to seek it out. And I think especially it's wise for us as worship leaders to find community outside of our church as well, so that we can have that outside perspective, outside encouragement, because they're not in the same exact thing with us in that community. But it's just, man, it's so important to make that effort and to work at that, because having those people in our lives is, I think a lot of times we don't realize it, but it's what gets us through, gives us those pushes in the hard time and gives us encouragement. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we skipped right over the introductions and pleasantries because I feel like you're a friend of Overflow, but we also have new people here. So will you just introduce yourself, tell us about Worship Probs and a little bit about where God has you today?
Yeah. So I was a worship pastor, as I said, and I was in maybe year 22 or 3, and I'm walking. This was back in 2016. I'm walking through the church one Sunday, and a dear older saint pulled me aside and sort of chewed me out for something that I can't remember exactly what it was. I wish I could. It was either something we had done or something we hadn't done in the service. And as she walked away, I stood there and I sort of laughed to myself, and I thought, man, I wonder how many people are having these kinds of conversations today around the world, like worship leaders and pastors. And so I started this Instagram account. It was called Worship Leader Probs back then, but it's called Worship Probs now. And I just thought, I need to vent a little bit. I was anonymous for several years, and I just need to make some memes, and they were terrible in the beginning. If you go back and look, they were horrible. They're horrible. But I've sort of felt better, and it was mostly me kind of showing my phone to Kim, my wife, and saying, "Is this funny?" And she would sort of look at me in a disappointed way and be like, "Are you still doing this? When is the gas going to run out on this?" And he's going to move on to the next thing. And so, it kind of took on a little bit of a life of its own. So we started a podcast in 2018, and then in 22, May 1st of 22, I stepped into this full time. So I stepped off of church staff, and we have these 3 E's that we talk about with Worship Props. We want to entertain you. We want to make you laugh so that you can hopefully be reminded you're not in this by yourself. You're not alone. We're all wrestling with the same stuff. We want to entertain, encourage, want to encourage you in your ministry. We want to help equip you. And so that's kind of those are our measuring stick for what we do. And we do it through our social accounts, our podcast, Worship Props podcast. And then we have a thing in the car called Worship Karaoke, which Andrea was just on. And
Yes.
It was the funnest episode, man. It's such a blast. And so we get in a car and we sing old worship songs, and we have conversations about ministry and worship and leadership and all kinds of stuff. And so, so that's where I'm at. My wife and I both work from home. And so I am a little over 2 years into this now, and she's still speaking to me, which is a good thing.
Amazing.
Because we're together 24/7. And so yeah, that's a little snapshot of my life today.
That's amazing. That is awesome. So maybe I should invite Kim on my next girls trip, and Gabriel should invite you on his next guys trip, and then maybe do you
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Yours would probably be way more productive than ours would be, but I think that'd be a great.
Yeah. Yes. My guess is Kim and I would cry a lot and pray a lot and you know what I mean? But then also eat a lot. And yeah, it would be very good time. So I have to tell you this. I don't know if I've told you this before, because this was before we met, but I was invested in Worship Leader Probs as an anonymous account. I was like, who is this person? And I don't know if it's just my curiosity or what it was, but Brian, I was on that reveal Zoom. I was
were
there.
You really? Oh
yes.
My gosh. It was so funny. I had no master plan, that's a little glimpse into the inner workings of my mind. I started this and I just thought, I'll get some therapy out of this, whatever. And then people started to follow it. And then I started getting these questions like, how do you know that's exactly what we're dealing with at our worship team. I was like, well, because I'm a worship pastor, I'm dealing with the same thing in my church. And then I started to get these questions like, who are you? Does your pastor know you run this? Does your team know you run this? And so it kind of became a little bit of a thing. I never wanted any of this to be about me. And so I turned to Kim and I was like, I don't know what to do. And I said, I think I'm going to give a challenge. Like if you get us to this certain number of followers on Instagram, and I think the number was 50,000. If you get us to 50,000 followers, I'll tell you who I am. And I turned to her and I was like, that'll never happen. And so it happened, man. And that was all the community kind of just wanting to make it happen. And I was so scared that people would find out it was just this random guy from Indiana, that they would just, I'm out of this. I'm unfollowing this account. Thankfully that didn't happen. But we did a reveal on, it was Father's Day of I don't remember the year, 2019 maybe or something like that, 2018, and it was wild, man. It's been a wild ride. I never ever expected to be doing this for a living, like as my ministry. I just didn't see that as a possibility. I didn't, but God often takes things that we can't even comprehend and breathe his life into them. And so here we are. But that's so funny. I didn't know you were on there. That was, gosh, people were always guessing. Everybody thought it was David Crowder. And I was like, oh gosh, lower your expectations. Lower your expectations.
Lower the bar. Oh, that's funny. You know what though? I think, I don't even remember like how it transpired that I ended up there, but I was just like, I need to know. Like, I need to know who this person is. However, I will say that it was probably actually really exciting for people to realize and to meet you. Like, this is a guy who's doing the same thing that I am. Right? Like week in, week out, showing up Sunday after Sunday, serving a team, serving a church. And that is so relatable. And not that, it wouldn't have been cool for them if it was David Crowder, but that's not necessarily relatable for them because they're showing up every Sunday, dealing with the volunteer team. And the comparison's not that this is good and this is bad. It's more just that that's where they were at. And so my guess is that's why they love to stay and why people continue to follow along with you guys is because it's relatable. And for people to feel seen and heard, I think is really huge, especially in the worship community in small to medium-sized churches or people who are working with limited resources or with volunteers. It's like sometimes I just had somebody who I was chatting with say this. She's like, sometimes I just get in the throes of it that I'm like, I'm alone. I'm the only one doing this. Like no one else is facing this. And so to be reminded that they're not is such a gift for people, Brian. Before we get to the rest of today's episode, I wanted to tell you what's going on for the rest of the year at Overflow Worship. Now, 2024 has been incredible, but the rest of the year, I think, is going to be the best part. We have some new things, some things, guys, that we have never done before. And honestly, are not being done by anybody else. This is brand new, but if you want to be a part of it, if you want to see it, you have to head to our YouTube channel. So head on over to Overflow Worship Official on YouTube and make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss out on these brand new things that we are releasing. I am so excited about this because as I've been praying about the rest of this year, I believe that God is calling us at Overflow Worship to focus on worship, prayer, and joy. Why? Because we need those things at our core and our foundation, right? But also because in these times, there's good and there's really hard things going on right now. We want to call all of you, all of the Overflow Worship community to worship, prayer, and to find joy in the day-to-day. So we are bringing you something brand new only on YouTube. We've partnered with people like Brian Tabor at Worship Probs. We've partnered with Allie Lundeen from Proverbs 31 Girl on Instagram. We've also partnered with amazing organizations like Praise Charts to bring you something so unique, so new, and so amazing. I'm Just can't wait for you guys to see it. So head on over to YouTube at Overflow Worship Official. Make sure you hit subscribe so you know when the first one releases, which, just a little spoiler, it'll be Thanksgiving Day. But you'll get an email then when it's live. All right, let's get back to today's episode with Brian Tabor.
It can be leadership of any kind can be really, really lonely and really isolating. And even in the context of your own church, let alone like outside the walls of your church, like surely nobody is dealing with this. Like surely nobody had a woman come up and ask them to sing Circle of Life from The Lion King in a worship service, which happened to me. Like there's no way that happened to anybody else today, you know? And then I post a meme about it, and sure enough, they come out of the woodwork, man. We do this thing on our podcast called Prayer Concerns, where we have people send in the like savage comments they get from their church people. And we have a variation of that called Prayer Concerns Unusual Song Request. And so we have people share, and we've had, oh my goodness, like this a couple of weeks ago, we did an episode where somebody requested Soul Man by the Blues Brothers. And I just thought, why would we do that? Why would we do that in a church service? So yeah, I'm so grateful that it has helped those people who felt alone. I mean, because there were lots of days where I felt alone. I thought nobody gets what I'm experiencing here. Nobody understands. Nobody understands the weekend commitment. You know, no, I mean, it's because it is relentless. I get that. You know, the last church I was in, we were 4 campuses, Saturday night service, 2 Sunday services. And I was for the majority of my time there, I was the only staff worship leader. So everything else was done by volunteers. And I remember just sitting in my office. Sometimes there were weeks where there were so many declines, like we're in the summertime or we're in a spring break or whatever. There were so many declines in Planning Center. I thought, I have no idea what we're going to do this weekend to figure out music in all of these different spaces and locations. But I'm so grateful that people have found found their people. We started talking about that at the beginning, you know?
Yeah.
It has been surprising and really fun and, you know, hard at times. You know, it's using a little bit of a different creative muscle and you know, the sun rises and sets with surprising regularity, you know, and so with every day there is a new expectation for content, and I'm sure you get that too. I mean, it's like, oh, what are we going to post today? What are we going to post today? I mean, and then we'll get somebody will send us a video from their church service where the drum cage collapsed or what, you know, whatever. So yeah, it's been a wild ride.
That's amazing. And I love how you invite people into it with you. Like, hey, let's commune together and talk about this together, laugh together, cry together, whatever, but like inviting them with you, like, hey, send us the funny things that have happened and let's talk about them. Let's laugh about them. And so it gives us like the freedom to make light of some of those things that it's like in the moment, you're like, oh my goodness, like, oh no, what are we gonna do? But then you get to the other side and it's like, okay, let's lighten this a little bit and let's just take it at face value for what it was. It was funny. And now, you know, we can laugh together, but then we can be together on the other side of it, which I think is just so special. And it makes me think of this. So I've been thinking a lot lately about the amount of pressure that is on these pastors and worship leaders on the platform. And it's always been that way, but specifically now, I think with everything that's going on in the world, people are looking to the platform for like affirmation, assurance, or like, is everything going to be okay? And they're like, they don't know where else to look for like a tangible visual. So they're looking to the platform, and we've got these young leaders that are like, I don't know, like I've got the same questions you do. Right. And so to be able to have a community where that's a safe place to talk about those things, I think is powerful. especially because a lot of times people don't realize that there's aftermath. Yes, there's funny, like we laugh about these things, that these song requests or our, the prayer concerns, whatever, but there's aftermath on the other side of that we don't always feel equipped for. So I would love to hear from your perspective, like, how do you encourage people through that when they come to you and they're like, okay, like, here's the funny thing, but like actually on the other side of it, I really had a hard time dealing with it because I didn't know what to say, or I didn't know, how to respond.
Yeah. And that's real, man. That is so real. That's an excellent question, because I used to pray a prayer rolling into every weekend. And that would be, Lord, prepare me for every conversation I'm going to have this weekend. There's going to be conversations that will encourage me. There'll be conversations that won't encourage me. Give me your words. Help me to be, conscious that in that moment I'm talking to one of your kids, and you love them just like you love me. And so I think, having that perspective of kind of leading through the situation, no matter what somebody comes up and says to you, they're often talking about something from their past. In my experience, a hurt or a something where a church leader that may not even be in your church, might have been someplace else in another state, another city, whatever, that maybe some hurt that they experienced in that place that they're still carrying. And so, just being reminded, we can't take those things personally. We have to be, reminded with that perspective of, God, I'm talking to one of your kids here.
Yeah.
What can I say to help get them through this? And then, in our context, we like to make you laugh so that then we can talk about what happened. We'll make a meme about, there's lots of memes out there like this, but, older guys in, squeezing into their skinny jeans or whatever to get up there and lead, on the weekend or whatever. But then we can have a conversation about, and you talked about pressure on the platform. I think one of the increasing pressures is there is this phenomenon of aging out worship leaders.
Yeah.
We've been having conversations about that on our podcast, and that's such a burden to me, because that is a pressure that exists today that, when I was a kid that didn't exist. And for some reason it seems to be oftentimes focused on the worship leader, maybe not the senior pastor or the women's ministry person or whatever. It's for some reason the worship leader has to be, young and hip and all that stuff. And I've known friends who have gotten aged out at the point in their ministry where they had more to offer than they'd ever had to offer before. And that's a burden for me. It's like we gotta find a way to change that conversation, because one of the things I love about what you do is, helping and supporting, newly positioned leaders. That's another burden for me, because we get DMs every week from people who say, hey, my pastor found out I played guitar, so he put me in charge of worship. What should I do? Where do I start? And I'm like, oh no, please tell me that's a joke. And it's not a joke. It's like, and pastors, this is not an anti-senior pastor thing, because they've got their own pressures, and they're just trying to, put people in the right spots. And, for every worry that a worship leader has, a senior pastor has 50 worries, and so I get that. But one of the things I love about what you do is helping those folks, because the pressure is real. You got to find a way to process that. And I think organization and systems and that level of preparation, in addition to your spiritual preparation, all that goes a really long way into into helping and maybe keeping those things from happening all the time. But gosh, you've got to be prepared, because your prayer concern moment is coming. If it hasn't happened yet, it's coming. And send it to us when it does does happen. But it's gonna happen sooner or later. And so I love that. I love the stuff that Overflow does to help those newly positioned. And I feel like you are uniquely positioned to do that. We need that. We need that education. We haven't done, as a church on the whole, this is a bit of a soapbox for me. I don't think we've done a great job of defining and finding tracks for people who are called to be worship leaders. I mean, that's a really important role in the life of the church. And so oftentimes we start with the gifts instead of the spiritual or the leadership. It'd be so refreshing for us to get a DM that said, hey, my pastor approached me because he said he saw leadership skills in me and he wondered if I played an instrument. We don't ever get that DM. I would love to get that DM, Yeah. And so, gosh, that's a very, very long, meandering answer to the question that launched it. But
so good.
I love, I'm passionate about the next generation. I know you are as well. And I love being able to say to people, hey, there's a link in our bio for the Worship Leader Startup Toolkit that you need to dive into with both feet and, get dunked in that, because it's good stuff.
Well, thank you for that. And I feel like there's such a big need right now, especially because there is a big turn. And like you said, whatever it is it because people burned out after COVID mixed with this aging out concept, which I'm with you. That's such a hard one, because it's like, why are we pushing out the people who've got the experience and the wisdom? Let's rather, empower them in a position where they can be training up, the next generation. But I think the lens, so backing up to what you were talking about the very beginning of my question of like, remembering that we're talking to a child of God, remembering like who we're talking to, and then remembering like what this is really about, because it's so easy music is really easy to criticize, first of all.
Oh, gosh,
it just is. Because if you have any sort of creative preferences or even musical understanding, you can be like, oh, that was a little too fast, or that was a little too slow, or whatever. That's not my preference. Or, she was a little flat singing that high, note when it's like, can you sing that B flat at 7 a.m.?
Right. Come on. Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's so powerful for us to remember, though, it's not about us.
Right.
Absolutely. It's coming from some other place, some other hurt. And so if we can take that lens, it removes the, at least in the moment, removes the criticism and the defenses. I would, in that situation, which is great.
And I would even say, if you're just starting out, it would be helpful. If you have a spouse or you have a friend that you can, may sound cheesy, but practice these conversations. You practice playing, you practice singing. I hope you're practicing and kind of preparing for like transitions that you're going to say between songs and all that. Practice these conversations, practice being in the moment when somebody comes up to you and they're super honked off that their kid didn't get the solo, or you didn't do any hymns. Or your hymns were at the wrong speed, or all of that. Practice those conversations so they're not hitting you completely out of left field, and you're like, well, I had no idea somebody wouldn't think that everything I did was absolutely fantastic.
It's a gift to this community.
Right,
what?
Exactly. And that, because that's going to happen. So I'd practice. I'd have some things in my hip pocket, like that answers that I'd thought out ahead of time. Like if somebody complains about audio, well, it's really easy to just say, oh, you're old and you just don't like our music. Well, No, okay, what if there's a health reason for that? What if there's what if it's where they're sitting in the sanctuary, and there's maybe a better location for them? You know, they're all so I'd try to have, like, make a note in your phone even of, you know, some pre-thought out answers, and so that you're not like, I am the kind of person, if left to my own devices, like if it's up to me to shoot off the cuff, I'm gonna probably get that wrong a fair percentage of the time, like, because it can feel personal. Like, if you don't have the right mindset, it can feel like an attack. And so, yeah, I'd rehearse, I'd practice, I'd have some things written out on my phone, you know, and for me, typing things out like that gets it into my mind and my heart a little faster than if I didn't. And so I would encourage you to practice just like you practice everything else, so that you're ready, because it's going to happen. It's people. And, you know, because of like American Idol and The Voice, everybody thinks they're like one opportunity away from being the next Carrie Underwood or whatever. And so, you know, you're going to have conversations with parents that are going to disappoint them.
Yeah.
When they don't understand why you didn't give their kid this solo or whatever. Well, think through that stuff ahead of time, you know, prepare for that ahead of time. And because here's the other surprise. You can handle it perfectly and it still might go sideways.
Yep.
I'm sure, I know you have, I have had experiences that I worked as hard as I could work to make this into a win for everybody in the room. And it just wasn't going to happen.
Yep.
And so, yeah, those are some of the low points, you know, and God is so gracious. It won't all be low points. There'll be lots, but you know what, the old adage of, you know, if you look at him, you don't see a lot of green growth on the top of the mountain. You see all the green growth down in the valley, in the low spot. And so you're going to grow from it. And the next time it happens, you're going to handle it better than you did.
Yeah.
And I mean, I am in a different season of ministry now. I'm still learning how to handle situations with people, because we're in the people business, right? We're trying to connect people with Jesus, who will change their life. And we've got to figure out the people stuff, because it's huge. It's so important.
And, you know, when you talk about like rehearsing and practicing, I think that's so valuable, because that helps us come at these conversations from a standpoint of caring for the person, right?
Yep,
because you've
absolutely.
you've already gone through the mental gymnastics of like, okay, you can't recreate the scenario perfectly, but when there is an objection, you know, this is how I'm going to start that conversation. And you can view it through the lens of caring for that person, not through the lens of like, oh, that actually really hurt my feelings, which it does. And you need to deal with that afterwards, of course, but you don't respond out of that then, which I think is really powerful. And we can come at it from a point of like, how can I coach this person through this moment? Like, tell me more about that. Like, tell me more about what made you say that, or, you know, help me understand where you're coming from. And it's so much easier to say that when we've thought about that beforehand of how we want to respond.
We had an Easter once, and we made a specific choice in a stage element that we had. We had these letters. They were 6 feet tall, Jesus. It spelled out Jesus. They were lined with multiple layers of LED lights, and we could do all kinds of stuff with them. They're 6 feet tall. There's, you know, every letter. So it's Easter Sunday, you know, we sang, What a Beautiful Name. And then as a response to the message, we came back with What a Beautiful Name. And I can remember I'm standing down on the floor in front of the platform after service, and a lady comes and just starts ripping into me because we never sing the name of Jesus in our church. Why don't we ever sing about the name of Jesus? And I literally like looked over my shoulder at these 6'2" tall letters spelling Jesus, knowing we had just sung What a Beautiful Name,
The name
of Jesus twice in the service. And so it would have been really easy for me to just dismiss that and say, you're bananas, man. Like, were you in this service? Like, look behind me. They're lit. They're 6 feet tall. Are you kidding me? And so, but thankfully, my wife was with me, and she would often kind of put her hand on my back because she could see the red alert going off. And I felt that hand on my back, and I was like, tell me about that. So, this particular lady, she is really, really frustrated that we don't do more hymns. And she just picked the kind of the inaccurate way to describe that to me.
Sure.
And she was, we had made the decision to not have a choir that Easter, and she was in the choir. She was honked off about that too. And so it came out in this way that really wasn't even true and didn't really make any sense. But we were able to get down to it, and it is often people coming out of something they miss or something they grew up with, whatever it is. Look, I grew up with the $6 Million Man, the TV show. It was my favorite show of all time. I miss it. I really miss it. I don't understand why they haven't redone it. Maybe they have and I missed it. But like, there are things that I miss in my life. Like there are songs that we used to sing in church that I miss. And so I get that. So that was a feeling I could tap into. And I was like, man, I get that. I get that churches are doing different things now. We're making different decisions now. And, I can tell you that we make them intentionally. We don't think hymns are bad, and we do hymns. We just didn't do any today. And we do have a choir. We just didn't have one today. And, so, kind of helping them understand and just remembering that the hurt is real to them, but there's a really good chance it's not even directed at you. It's directed at somebody who's not even in the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, and I think as we wrap up our conversation today, as we walk through those conversations, so we do what we can to prepare, right? And then in the moment we execute as best we can, but then it's important to go to our community, to our leadership, to like, hey, this is what happened. Can you help me for the next time and help me formulate responses or whatever? Because especially for people who are new worship leaders, young, newly positioned, whatever, it's like we feel like we're just thrown out into the middle of the ocean and with no life raft. And so it's important that we speak up and say something like, hey, I think I'm drowning. Could somebody help me?
Absolutely.
And so, just as an encouragement for everybody who's listening, who's watching, don't be an island in that either. Make sure you reach out, because there's people who've gone before you who have dealt with it and can help, walk you through it, or at least encourage you, or, with your permission, make a meme.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Make a meme about it. It'll be a therapeutic. I love that you just said that, Andrea. I think one of the things that we've lost a little bit is like the art and the practice of mentoring, finding mentors and finding people to mentor. Find it. Maybe it's at the church down the street. Somebody who's my wife is a vocalist, and she used to always tell people, you want to be a better singer, then sing with people who are better than you are.
Yeah.
And you want to be a better runner, run with people who are better runners than you are, and they will push you. They will mentor, find a mentor. Like I was required for my ordination to have a mentor. And if my requirement was 2 years, I had a mentor for 15 years probably, because it was so meaningful to me. Find somebody that can walk with you through these. They can be a sounding board. They can help you maybe write your ideas of how you're going to respond to people when they come and want to talk to you about, something they thought could have gone differently in the service or whatever. That idea of finding somebody to walk with that's really, really important.
Amen. Amen to that. I think that's a good word for us to end our conversation with today, is to find somebody to walk with. And so, Brian, thank you for being here today. Thank you for sharing your heart and encouragement for worship leaders all over. You do it here, you do it with Worship Probs, and we're just really grateful. And so I thank you. And will you tell everybody where they can find you if they haven't connected with you guys yet? What are the best ways to do that?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So you can find us at Worship Probs, Probs, on most of the socials. On TikTok, we're still called Worship Leader Probs. You can find us on wherever you listen to podcasts, the Worship Probs podcast. And then on our YouTube, you can see full episodes of Worship Karaoke on the Worship Probs YouTube. And you can see our episode with Andrea, which was just so much fun. We were so glad to get you on, and a lot of meaningful stuff as well as some fun stuff. And so that's where you can connect with us.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, everybody, we'll put all that in the description and the show notes too, so you can easily find your way around. But I highly recommend you guys connect up with Brian on Worship Probs on Instagram. And yeah, the Worship Karaoke was so fun. What was it? Is it season 4, episode 1? Was that?
You kicked it off, man. You kicked
Amazing.
off season 4, episode 1.
So fun. I had a blast. So thank you again for having me, and thanks for being here today. Everybody, thanks for joining in for another episode of the Overflow Worship Podcast. Until next time, keep on thriving.